Something in you already knows that the outer world is supposed to change. You have looked at the numbers in your account, at the walls of the place you live, at the condition of your body, at the distance between where you stand and where you know you belong, and something inside you has refused to accept that this is final. The desire is real, the wanting is genuine, but the circumstances remain. The money does not move, the relationships do not shift, the work does not open, the body does not transform. And after all the effort, after all the longing, the visible world stays exactly where it was, as though it cannot hear you, as though matter itself is indifferent to everything you feel. The explanation most people accept is this: the outer world must change first. Show me the result, and then I will believe. Show me the money, and then I will feel abundant. Show me the open door, and then I will act with confidence. The mind waits for physical proof before it will commit to an image of something better. And so the inner picture keeps copying the outer evidence, adjusting itself daily to match whatever matter presents, turning desire into a moving target that never holds still long enough to become a command. The reversal that almost no one considers is that matter does not lead, matter follows. The form that matter obeys is never found in circumstances. It is found inside the one who looks at those circumstances and refuses to be governed by them. Near the close of the 19th century, a thinker working in relative poverty arrived at a conclusion that would quietly contradict the entire assumption of his age. His name was Wallace Wattles, and what he understood was not comfort or optimism. It was a law of causation so precise that he described it in the language of substance and form. Wattles taught that thought does not merely inspire or encourage. It impresses form upon the formless substance from which all visible things emerge. The visible world, in his understanding, is the obedient product of a form that was held inwardly before it ever appeared outwardly. Matter follows the impressed image, not the wish, not the vague hope, not the daydream entertained for a moment, and then replaced by doubt. The image that is held, maintained, and acted upon in the certain way. This video will reveal the one inner form that matter must obey. Not one of many tools, not one technique among alternatives, but the single invisible structure that determines whether physical reality reorganizes itself around your desire or continues to ignore it entirely. Before that law becomes clear, however, there is a question worth holding. If matter truly follows the form that is impressed within, then the reason nothing has changed may not be that the law is failing. The reason may be that the image you are holding keeps changing, that you are giving matter a different instruction every time evidence becomes uncomfortable, and that the physical world is following your form faithfully while you remain convinced it is not listening at all. Each morning, without noticing it, the mind performs a ritual of surrender. The eyes open, and before any deliberate thought is formed, attention moves outward, scanning the room, the phone, the calendar, the bank balance, the mirror, the inbox. The first impression of the day is not chosen. It is received from whatever the visible world presents. And whatever the visible world presents in that first unguarded moment becomes the seed of the inner image for the hours that follow. Circumstance speaks first and the mind obeys. What makes this so difficult to see is that it feels entirely reasonable. Of course, you look at what is in front of you. Of course, you respond to what is real. The trouble is that in Wattles' understanding, what appears real is not the origin of your condition. It is the residue of a previously held form. When you let today's circumstances rewrite your inner image, you are not responding to reality. You are allowing old form to reassert its authority over new form before new form has had time to become matter. The desire does not disappear. It survives the morning. But it is weakened by what the evidence presented. And so by midday, the image of what you want has already been adjusted downward to better match what is. By evening, desire and circumstance have negotiated a compromise. The inner picture no longer shows what you truly want. It shows a slightly improved version of what already exists, trimmed to fit the evidence, cropped to avoid disappointment. And matter, following this compromised image with perfect loyalty, produces nothing new. The frustration that builds over weeks, months, and years under this pattern is not the frustration of someone whose law has failed them. It is the frustration of someone whose image keeps surrendering before the law has time to work. Matter is obeying. It is obeying the dominant form, the form that the visible world keeps reinstating every morning, the form that belongs not to desire, but to habit. And until that pattern is broken at its root, the outer world will continue to mirror not what you want, but what you have repeatedly agreed to see. Many people, understanding that thought influences reality in some way, have attempted a method. They sit quietly, they imagine a desired outcome, they allow themselves to feel good about it briefly, and then they return to the day. This is the common form of visualization that circulates widely and produces results rarely. The image is vague. It floats above a concrete feeling without ever landing inside one. It is pleasant but not definite. It is entertained rather than impressed. And the difference between entertaining a thought and impressing it is the difference between a guest passing through a house and a tenant who has signed a lease. The goals themselves shift. What was wanted with urgency last month has been quietly replaced by something smaller, or abandoned for something different, or suspended pending better circumstances. The inner picture changes not because the person grew and refined their vision, but because evidence applied pressure and the image yielded. Each revision feels like wisdom. Each retreat from the original desire is dressed as practicality. In reality, each revision is a withdrawal of the impressed form, and without that form, matter has no new instruction to follow. There is also the particular error of imagining one thing while expecting another. A person holds an image of a life that is financially free. They feel it for a few minutes with something resembling conviction. Then they encounter a bill, a rejection, a conversation about economic difficulty, and the expectation underneath the visualization reasserts itself. The image said abundance, the expectation said lack. Matter, responsive to the dominant and sustained pattern rather than the briefly held picture, follows the expectation. The visualization happens in the room, but the expectation lives in the foundation, and the foundation determines what gets built. What all of this amounts to is a treatment of the inner image as though it were fantasy rather than form. Fantasy entertains and releases, form impresses and holds. The mind that approaches visualization as a pleasant experience it might enjoy and then set aside has not understood what Wattles was pointing toward. The impressed image is not something the mind plays with. It is something the mind issues as a command, holds against contradiction, and protects against the constant pressure of existing matter to reinstate its own dominance. The cost of this unstable inner image is not immediately obvious because matter does not disobey in a spectacular way. There is no loud failure, no sudden collapse. The cost is subtler. Matter simply continues to follow the old form. The physical world does not punish the person who holds contradictory images. It merely stays loyal to whichever image is strongest, and because the old form has years of reinforcement behind it, it remains stronger than a desired image that appears briefly and is quickly revised. So the external world persists. Circumstances that were supposed to change by now have not, and the person searches for explanations without finding the actual one. Contradiction is what matter receives, not a clear impression of a new form, but a sequence of competing signals. Abundance this morning, scarcity by afternoon, confidence this week, doubt by the weekend. The image of a new life held until the current one becomes too loud to ignore, then immediately replaced by the image of survival. Matter cannot follow contradictory instruction any more than a builder can construct a house from plans that change every hour. What gets built under those conditions is not the intended structure. What gets built is confusion made solid, or more precisely, nothing new at all. The form does not hold because nothing in the ordinary practice of life supports its holding. There is no commitment to the image as a definite blueprint. There is no discipline that protects it from revision under fear. There is no faith that functions as ballast, keeping the form stable while matter takes time to reorganize. Without these, the image dissolves repeatedly, and each dissolution resets the instruction. Matter receives the withdrawal of the form as clearly as it received the form itself, and returns to obeying the pattern it has always known. Physical action under these conditions loses coherence. Because the inner form keeps changing, the actions taken do not accumulate toward a consistent structure. They point in one direction and then another, energized by desire on some days and paralyzed by fear on others. The outer world observes this inconsistency and reflects it back. The relationship between cause and effect becomes invisible because the cause keeps shifting. And the person seeing only the effect concludes that effort is not working, that the world is resistant, that something external stands between them and what they want. The real obstruction is interior, and it has no dramatic face. It is simply an unstable image meeting a physical world that follows form too faithfully to follow anything else. Behind every physical result, there is a form that preceded it. Behind every circumstance that has persisted in your life, there is an inner pattern that matter has been obeying faithfully. This is not metaphor. In Wattles' understanding, it is the operating principle of creation itself. The formless takes form in response to the impression that is held within thinking substance. Matter does not decide what to become on its own authority. It follows instruction. The question is never whether matter is following something. The question is whether what it is following belongs to you or to the old pattern that preceded your desire. The instruction that matter follows is not a command spoken aloud or a declaration written on a wall. It is the sustained inner form, the image held with enough faith and feeling and consistency to become dominant in the field of thought that Wattles called thinking stuff. Dominance is the operative word, not intensity alone, not sincerity alone. Sustained, faithful, definite dominance of the new form over the old one. When that dominance is achieved, matter does not resist. Matter reorganizes through whatever channels are available because reorganization toward the impressed form is not an act of will performed on the physical world. It is the natural consequence of a law that has always been in operation. The law is simple, and its simplicity is what makes it easy to dismiss. Thought creates form. Form impresses substance. Substance becomes matter in the configuration of the form. This is not one philosophical tradition among many. For Wattles, this was the mechanical description of how reality actually works, not allegorically, but causally. The mind that impresses a definite form upon the formless is the mind that is functioning as a first cause, rather than an effect. The mind that copies its image from circumstances is a second cause, reproducing what already is, instead of originating what is to come. The section ahead names this law with the precision that Wattles himself intended. It does not soften the claim or dress it as inspiration. It states it as a principle that operates whether it is acknowledged or not, followed deliberately or ignored, understood clearly or misread as wishful thinking. Matter follows the impressed form. The next question is what impressing means. What makes a form real enough to command physical obedience? And why so many who attempt this law receive only the appearance of following it without ever producing the transformation it promises? The first element of the law is this: thought creates form. Not thought as idle mental noise, not the background stream of anxiety and commentary that fills most waking hours, but thought as a deliberate, concentrated, held impression of something definite. When a thought is held with intention and sustained with clarity, it does not remain merely psychological. In Wattles' framework, thought acts upon the formless substance that permeates and underlies all visible matter, impressing upon it a pattern, a specific configuration toward which that substance will begin to organize. This is not a poetic description. For Wattles, it was a causal statement. A held thought produces a real form within a real substance that real matter then follows. Form impresses substance. The substance Wattles described was not an abstraction invented for encouragement. He called it thinking stuff, an original formless medium that is alive, intelligent, and responsive. It is not passive material waiting to be shaped by external force. It is intelligent substance that responds to the impressions made upon it by thought. The form that thought creates does not float in imagination disconnected from the world. It enters the medium from which all visible things arise, and it begins to draw that medium toward the configuration it represents. This is why Wattles insisted on definiteness. A vague impression on a responsive substance produces a vague reorganization. A sharp, sustained impression produces a clear result. Faith holds the form. This is the element most often separated from the law, by those who want only the creative promise without the interior requirement. Faith, in Wattles's usage, is not belief in a creed or a doctrine. It is the inner state that keeps the form stable in thought. Where faith is present, the impression remains. Where doubt enters, the impression weakens, the form blurs, and the substance that was beginning to organize receives a contradictory signal. The practical consequence is that the physical reorganization slows or stops. Faith is not an emotion added for spiritual flavor. It is the force that determines whether the impressed form persists long enough to become matter. Gratitude connects the thinker to source. In the certain way that Wattles described, gratitude is not courtesy or sentiment. It is the living connection between the individual mind and the formless intelligence from which all supply flows. A mind held in gratitude is a mind in alignment with the creative force rather than in opposition to it. Doubt creates separation. Complaint creates separation. Gratitude closes the gap, keeping the channel open through which the formless substance can reorganize toward the impressed image. This is why Wattles wrote of gratitude with such insistence. Not because it feels good to be grateful, but because it is operationally necessary to the law's completion. Action allows matter to follow. The impressed image does not produce its result without the bridge of action taken in alignment with the form. Wattles was never a passive philosopher. He understood that the formless substance reorganizes itself through channels, and that those channels are constructed in part by the actions of the person who holds the form. To impress the image and then act from fear, from the old pattern, from the evidence of present circumstances, is to lay a blueprint on the table and then build according to a different plan. Action is the physical expression of the impressed form. When action is consistent with the blueprint, the bridge between inner form and outer matter is completed, and matter has no law to follow, except the one that has been both impressed and acted upon. What Wallace Wattles wrote was not an early version of popular positive thinking. The distance between his teaching and the vague optimism that later borrowed his vocabulary is significant, and collapsing it does a disservice to both the man and the law he described. Wattles did not teach that feeling good would attract good things. He taught that a definite thought, held with faith, sustained by gratitude, and followed by action in the certain way, would impress a form upon formless substance, and that substance would become matter in the image of that form. Feeling was a component of the process, but feeling without definiteness was not the process. Optimism without the impressed image was not the law. Wattles was precise in a way that makes most readers uncomfortable, because precision requires commitment. He spoke of the formless substance not as a distant spiritual concept, but as a present, intelligent, responsive medium that permeated all matter, that held the potential for every form, and that waited, in a sense, for a definite impression to give it direction. This was not theology. It was, in his understanding, a description of the actual creative mechanism underlying physical reality. And from this description followed everything else: the insistence on clarity, the insistence on faith, the insistence on gratitude, the insistence on action, the rejection of vagueness, the rejection of contradiction, the rejection of impressing one form while expecting another. Definiteness of impression is the standard Wattles held to, and it is the standard that separates those who engage with this law casually from those who engage with it completely. To become precise inwardly means to form a clear, specific picture of what is desired, to know what it looks and feels like from the inside, to hold that picture with the kind of steadiness that refuses to collapse under the weight of contrary evidence. This level of inner precision is not common. It requires a person to act as a thinker in a deliberate sense, to govern their inner image, instead of receiving it from whatever the world presents. This is what Wattles meant by rising to the level of cause. The formless substance takes the form impressed. This sentence, in various forms, recurs throughout Wattles' major works, and its recurrence is not accidental. It is the hinge on which the entire teaching turns. If the formless takes the impressed form, then the impressed form is the variable the thinker can control. Not the economy, not the behavior of other people, not the current balance in any account. The variable that governs whether physical reality reorganizes itself is the form held inwardly, the definiteness of the image, the steadiness of the faith, the consistency of the action. The outer world is a dependent variable. The inner form is the independent one. Wattles' entire system rests on the clarity of this distinction. The phrase "visualize your desires" has traveled so far from Wattles' original teaching that it has become almost its opposite. What is commonly called visualization in the popular self-help tradition is a gentle mental exercise in which a pleasant image is held briefly, enjoyed emotionally, and released back into ordinary thinking. This has almost nothing to do with what Wattles described. The impressed image is not a meditation session. It is not a vision board. It is not 5 minutes of imagining before sleep. It is a definite, sustained, protected inner form that functions as the blueprint by which the formless substance is directed. Calling casual visualization the same thing as the impressed image is like calling a sketch on a napkin the same thing as an architect's engineering drawing. Daydreaming is not impression. The mind that drifts pleasantly through images of a desired life, enjoying the feel of them without committing to them, is not impressing form upon substance. It is entertaining imagery, which is a fundamentally different act. Entertainment releases. Impression holds. When Wattles wrote of thought-impressing form, he was describing an act of deliberate, concentrated will applied to a specific mental picture with enough sustained intention to make that picture dominant over the competing images that ordinary experience continuously supplies. The casual fantasizer produces no change in substance because no sustained impression is made. The image is visited and left, like a place one passes through without ever settling in. Fear is the mechanism by which the impressed image is most commonly abandoned. A person forms a clear desire, holds it with some intention, and then encounters evidence that the desire has not yet appeared in physical form. The evidence is real: the account balance, the closed door, the unanswered call, the unchanged condition. And in the presence of that evidence, something that feels like common sense whispers that the image should be revised, that holding it further is delusional, that to adjust to reality is wisdom. This is not wisdom. In Wattles' framework, this is the moment at which old form reasserts its authority over the new impression, using fear as its instrument. The picture that is abandoned at the first sign of contrary evidence was never truly impressed. It was held tentatively, with one hand already on the door. A maintained inner blueprint is what the law actually requires, and the word maintained carries more weight than any other. An impression is not a single act. It is a repeated and protected act. The person who impresses a definite form each morning and then defends it through the day, returning to it when doubt appears, restoring it when fear has temporarily displaced it, acting from it when evidence seems to argue against it. That person is following the law that Wattles described. The person who visualizes once, notices no immediate change, and concludes the method failed, has not followed the law at all. The method requires maintenance. The form requires protection. Matter requires time. And the bridge between the inner impression and the outer result is built not in a moment of inspired feeling, but through the sustained, disciplined, faithful holding of the form until the substance has reorganized entirely. Matter follows the dominant impressed form. This is the statement at the center of everything Wattles taught about creative law, and the word dominant is the one that gives the statement its full weight. Matter does not follow every thought that passes through the mind. It follows the form that has achieved dominance, the form that, through repetition and sustained faith, has become stronger than the competing images that circumstance keeps supplying. This is why two people can hold the same desire and produce different results. One has impressed the form deeply enough that it becomes dominant. The other has held the desire at a level that never overtakes the old form reinforced by daily experience. Matter, following the law faithfully, obeys the stronger pattern in both cases. When the old form remains dominant, old matter remains. The physical circumstances that feel so immovable are not immovable by nature, they are loyal. They are the current physical expression of the form that has been dominant in the thinker's inner world, and they will continue to be expressed as long as that form remains dominant. This is not a punishment. It is not the world being cruel or indifferent. It is the law operating exactly as it should. The same law that keeps old matter in place is the law that will reorganize matter toward the new form when the new impression becomes dominant. The mechanism does not change. Only the form held within it determines whether the result is continuation or transformation. When a new form is held with faith and acted upon consistently, matter begins to reorganize through channels. This reorganization does not always begin where the thinker is looking. It begins where the law finds the most available path, through an unexpected conversation, through a decision that leads to another decision, through a perception that changes a relationship to an opportunity. The channels through which matter follows form are not predetermined in their appearance. They are determined in their direction. The direction is always toward the impressed form, and the thinker who understands this stops demanding that matter reorganize in a specific visible way and begins trusting that the reorganization is proceeding through the channels available to it. Obedience comes through law, not through force. This is perhaps the most important clarification for the person who has spent years trying to make the physical world change through effort, willpower, and deliberate external manipulation. Matter cannot be forced into a new form from the outside while the inner image remains unchanged. Force applied to circumstances without the impressed form behind it may produce temporary shifts, but those shifts will collapse back toward the dominant inner pattern as soon as the force is withdrawn. The change that persists, the transformation that is real and lasting, is the one that originates in a form so deeply impressed and so faithfully maintained that matter has no authority left to follow except the new one. The title of this video names a secret that Wattles embedded in his system with careful precision, one inner form that matter must obey. Not many forms, not a collection of techniques. One form, definite, maintained, held with faith, connected through gratitude, expressed through action. The entirety of the teaching from this point forward is about what that form is, what it requires, what interrupts it, and how a person who has spent years receiving their inner image from the outer world can begin deliberately to reverse the sequence. Form first, matter second, always. The impressed image is not a picture that floats in the mind the way a pleasant memory might surface and fade. It is a definite inner picture, specific in its content, clear in its outline, settled in its form. When Wattles used the word definite, he was issuing a technical requirement, not a general encouragement. The form that matter will follow must have a shape, a character, a specific identity. A desire expressed only as more or better or different from this has no defined form for substance to take. The thinker who cannot describe their desired result with clarity has not yet produced the form that the law requires. Definiteness is not a preference. It is the first condition of the mechanism. The impressed image is a felt form, not merely a visual snapshot. This distinction separates those who understand Wattles' mechanism from those who reduce it to mental pictures. The inner form must carry a felt sense of reality, a quality of inner knowing that this form is lawful, that it belongs to the field of what is possible for the thinker, that it is not imaginary in the diminishing sense of that word, but real in the causal sense. The difference between a visual snapshot and a felt form is the difference between observing a blueprint on a wall and living in the structure it describes. One is seen from the outside, the other is inhabited from within. The impressed image, properly formed, is inhabited. A command held in thought is what the mechanism ultimately produces when the image is both definite and felt. A command is not a wish asks, a command instructs. When the inner image reaches the level of a command, the thinking is no longer petitioning the formless substance for a result. It is informing the substance of the form it is to take. This distinction in the internal quality of the thought is what Wattles pointed toward when he described the state of the certain way. Not the uncertainty of hoping, not the passivity of wishing, but the authority of a mind that has impressed its form upon the medium of creation and expects the medium to follow. A blueprint sustained by faith is what keeps the command operative across time. The impressive act of holding a definite, felt, commanding inner form would accomplish little if it collapsed after the first day of contrary evidence. Faith is the substance of the mechanism's durability. It is the inner quality that says, this form is real before matter shows it. This impression is operative before circumstance confirms it. This blueprint stands even when the ground has not yet changed. Without faith functioning in this precise way, the impressed image weakens over time, not because the law has stopped working, but because the form being presented to the formless substance grows increasingly vague, uncertain, and finally unintelligible. A form protected from contradiction is the fifth dimension of the mechanism, and it is the one that most directly addresses the behavior described in the earlier sections. Every day, circumstances, conversations, memories, and fears will supply the mind with images that contradict the impressed form. Old matter will present itself as evidence of what is real, and the implicit argument will be that the impressed image should yield to this evidence. The thinker who understands the mechanism knows that each act of yielding is an act of re-impressing the old form upon the substance that was beginning to reorganize. Protection of the form is not denial of circumstances. It is the deliberate refusal to allow circumstances to function as the governing image. A pattern that action can follow is the final dimension of the impressed image as a mechanism. The form is not only for the inner world, it is a blueprint that action in the outer world must match. Every action taken in alignment with the impressed image is an act of physical cooperation with the law. Every action taken in fear, or from the old pattern, or in contradiction of the form, is a withdrawal of the bridge between inner impression and outer matter. The mechanism requires both poles, the form held within and the action taken without. Together, they constitute what Wattles called the certain way, the inner and outer expression of the single law that matter must follow. The sequence by which the inner image becomes outer matter is invisible at every stage except the last, which is why most people believe the result arrived through ordinary cause and effect, rather than through the operation of a law they may not have consciously followed. The sequence begins with attention. The inner image, once impressed, organizes where the mind's attention is directed. A mind carrying a definite form of abundance notices what a mind carrying a form of scarcity walks past entirely. The same world presents differently to these two minds, not because the world has changed, but because attention is being organized by the dominant inner form. What you carry inwardly determines what you see, and what you see determines what you believe is available. Attention organizes perception. This is the second movement in the sequence, and it is where the invisible mechanism begins to touch the physical world in a way that might be mistaken for psychology rather than law. The person who holds a definite impressed image of a different financial reality perceives opportunities that exist in plain sight but remain invisible to the mind organized around scarcity. This is not a matter of positive attitude filtering experience. It is the natural consequence of an inner form directing the mind's perceptual system toward the configurations that match the blueprint it is carrying. Perception is not neutral. It is organized always by the dominant inner form. Perception organizes choice. The third movement is where the sequence becomes behavioral. What is perceived as possible shapes what is chosen. A thinker whose inner form says, "Abundance is my lawful condition," will make different choices from a thinker whose inner form says, "Shortage is what I must manage." These choices are not always dramatic. They are often small. The decision to approach a conversation, to pursue a contact, to send a communication, to remain in a room long enough for an exchange to develop. Small choices, organized by the dominant inner form, begin to redirect the physical sequence of events in ways that are individually unremarkable, but cumulatively transformative. Choice organizes action. The fourth movement is where the sequence enters the fully physical domain, but its direction was already determined by the time it arrived here. The action taken by a person whose choices have been organized by a definite impressed form carries a different quality from action taken under fear or uncertainty. It is aimed, it is consistent. It does not reverse itself every few days because the inner image has shifted again. The action serves the blueprint because the choice that produced it came from a perception organized by a form that had been held with faith and clarity. The outer effort is real, but its direction has been determined entirely by something invisible. Action organizes contact. This fifth movement is where the mechanism becomes social and interpersonal. The actions taken in alignment with the impressed form bring the thinker into contact with people, places, situations, and resources that they would not have encountered while following the old pattern. This is what Wattles meant by channels. The formless substance does not reorganize in isolation from the physical world. It reorganizes through the channels that action opens. Those channels are people who become relevant, situations that become accessible, information that becomes available, each appearing not through supernatural intervention, but through the natural consequence of actions taken from a definite and sustained inner form. Contact organizes circumstance. The sixth movement is where what has been set in motion through impression, attention, perception, choice, action, and contact begins to crystallize into the physical arrangements that most people call results. A new financial circumstance is not created by thought alone nor by action alone. It is the product of an entire sequence, each stage of which was organized by the dominant inner form, beginning in the invisible and ending in the visible. Matter, at this final stage, follows a form it has been following invisibly through every stage that preceded this one. Circumstance becomes matter following form. This last movement is the one that appears in the outer world as a changed condition, a different account balance, an opened door, a new relationship, a shifted physical reality. But it was not born here. It was born in the moment the thinker impressed a definite form upon the formless substance and held it with enough faith and action to allow the entire invisible sequence to run its course. When this is understood completely, the physical result stops looking like luck or coincidence or the product of exceptional effort. It looks like what it actually is, the final and inevitable expression of a law that matter cannot disobey. The most common interruption to the mechanism is changing the image daily. Every revision of the inner form is a new instruction issued to the formless substance, and every new instruction cancels the progress of the previous one. The substance is not confused by this. It simply follows the latest dominant impression, which means it is always beginning again rather than continuing the reorganization that a held form would produce. A person who holds a clear image of wealth on Monday and revises it toward cautious survival by Friday has not maintained an impression for a week. They have issued 7 different instructions that taken together amount to no instruction at all. Allowing evidence to rewrite the form is the second great interruption, and it operates so naturally within ordinary thinking that most people do not recognize it as an act at all. They believe they are simply updating their expectations based on what is real. But in the law, as Wattles described it, the evidence that exists in the physical world is not the current reality. It is the past reality made visible. It is the old form expressed in matter. To allow it to rewrite the new impression is to allow the past to govern the future through the authority of the present moment. It is old matter speaking with the voice of fact and using that voice to prevent the new form from gaining the dominance it requires. Imagining wealth while feeling guilty introduces a contradiction into the impressed form that is particularly insidious because it operates below the level of conscious thought. The guilt, often inherited from beliefs about money, success, or worthiness, functions as a competing inner signal. The image says abundance. The guilt says this is not right for you. The formless substance receives both signals simultaneously, and the form it attempts to take is a compromise between them, which is to say, it takes no clean form at all. The competitive interference of guilt with the impressed image is one of the most powerful destroyers of the mechanism that Wattles described. Visualizing success while expecting failure creates the same bifurcated instruction. Expectation is not a mild emotional preference. In Wattles' understanding, it is the deeper current of thought, the sustained impression beneath the deliberate one. When the deliberate image says success and the expectation beneath it says failure, matter follows the deeper current. The expectation, precisely because it is habitual and sustained and fed by years of prior experience, is more dominant than the briefly held deliberate image. This is why Wattles insisted that the thinker not merely visualize, but believe, not merely picture, but expect with faith. The form that matter follows is the one that dominates at the level of sustained, habitual, deeply impressed thought. Acting against the image is a fifth interruption that converts the inner contradiction into a physical one. When the thinker holds an image of abundance and then makes every financial decision from a psychology of scarcity, the actions serve the old form, not the new one. The bridge between the inner impression and outer matter is built by action. If the action is built according to a different blueprint, the bridge leads to a different destination. Every action taken against the image is a vote for old matter, a physical confirmation that the inner form has not yet become dominant enough to govern behavior. Matter, receiving this signal, follows the action rather than the image because the action is the more recent and physically expressed instruction. Speaking old matter back into authority is the sixth interruption, and it works through language, the most socially reinforced expression of inner form. When the thinker speaks of their current circumstances as if they are the permanent and governing truth, when they describe their poverty, their illness, their failure, their limitation as the real condition that must be accommodated, they are not being honest. They are impressing the old form through the medium of speech, reinforcing it with the authority of verbalized conviction, and ensuring that the substance of their world continues to take the shape of what they have declared. What is spoken with conviction becomes part of the dominant inner pattern. Wattles understood this with precision, which is why the certain way included, among its requirements, the discipline of speech. Consider a builder who has been hired to construct a building. Before a single brick is laid, a blueprint must exist. The blueprint is not the building. It is the form the building will take. Every decision made on the site, the placement of walls, the height of ceilings, the position of doors, is made in reference to the blueprint. The builder does not decide these things each morning based on personal preference or based on what kind of buildings already exist in the neighborhood. The blueprint is the authority on the site, and the physical structure obeys it as a consequence of the builder's consistent reference to it. This is the relationship between the impressed image and the matter that follows it. The image is the authority, and the physical world is the building under construction. Now consider what would happen if that blueprint changed every few days. On Monday, the building was to be 3 floors tall. By Thursday, the client has revised it to 2. By the following Monday, they want the entrance on the opposite side. The builder, working faithfully from the most recent plan, begins laying foundations that will never be completed because the plan governing them keeps changing before they can be finished. The structure that results from this process is not a failed building. It is a foundation that doesn't match any plan in particular, a physical record of the decision to keep revising rather than to build. The absence of a held blueprint is not neutral. It is the active production of structural incoherence in the physical world. Matter cannot follow a form the thinker refuses to hold, and this impossibility is not a defect in the law. It is the law operating exactly as it should. The law says, impress a form and matter will follow. The law does not say change the form repeatedly and matter will somehow produce the desired result anyway. Refusing to hold the form, whether through fear, doubt, the pressure of evidence, or the habit of revising desire to match circumstance, is a decision to withhold the instruction. And matter, loyal to its law, follows the instruction it has been given, which under these conditions is the old form, always the old form. The blueprint that was never revised because it was never revoked by a new impression that was held long enough to become dominant. The impressed image is the blueprint. This is the central metaphor and the central fact simultaneously. When Wattles described the formless substance taking the form impressed upon it by thought, he was describing a process structurally identical to the relationship between a blueprint and a building, except that the medium is not inert material being shaped by external tools. The medium is intelligent, responsive, and alive. It does not need to be forced into the form. It moves toward it, through the channels available, as naturally as the builder who knows the plan moves toward its completion without requiring a separate instruction for every brick. The intelligence in the substance does the work of reorganization. The thinker's responsibility is to provide and maintain the form. Faith keeps the blueprint on the table. This is the metaphorical function of faith within the mechanism. It ensures that the blueprint remains the governing document on the construction site of your life. When doubt enters, the blueprint begins to curl at the edges. When fear is strong enough, the blueprint is removed from the table and replaced by the evidence of what the site currently looks like, the old, partially completed structure of the existing condition. The site crew, which is to say the formless substance and the channels through which it works, cannot complete the new structure if the blueprint has been taken off the table. Faith is the act of keeping the plan in place, of returning it to the center of the table every time doubt has moved it, and of refusing to allow the current state of the site to disqualify the plan that governs where the site is going. Action builds according to the blueprint. Every deliberate act taken in alignment with the impressed form is a brick laid from the plan. Every conversation initiated, every skill developed, every opportunity pursued, every relationship deepened in the direction of the desired form is a physical brick that reduces the distance between the inner blueprint and the outer building. The builder does not contemplate the blueprint indefinitely. They work, but every act of work is governed by the blueprint, oriented by it, aimed by it. The certain way is the discipline of ensuring that both the blueprint and the bricks are moving in the same direction at the same time. The image held inwardly, the action expressed outwardly, the substance organized between them into matter that could not have come into being through any other sequence. The person who understands this metaphor fully understands why the ordinary approach to changing life does not work. They are trying to change the building while leaving the blueprint unchanged, or they are updating the blueprint daily while trying to build from the version that existed last week. The integration of a stable inner form, held with faith, expressed through gratitude and enacted through action, is the only condition under which the building of a new physical reality can proceed without constant interruption. Matter obeys the form. The form must be impressed. The impressed form must be held. There is no shortcut in the law, and the blueprint metaphor makes this plain in a way that abstract description cannot. The obstacle standing between most people and the physical transformation they seek is rarely what they believe it is. They believe it is the economy or other people's behavior, or the absence of an opportunity, or the presence of an obstacle that circumstances have placed in their path. These feel entirely real and entirely external, which is precisely why they remain unexamined as causes. The actual blocker is invisible, interior, and largely unnoticed. It is not a lack of desire. The desire is often intense. It is not a lack of effort. Many people work exhaustingly toward what they want. The blocker is the absence of a stable, impressed form, an image of the desired reality that has achieved the dominance required for matter to reorganize around it. Without a stable form, desire remains a feeling rather than an instruction. Desire has no causal power in itself. It is the raw material of the creative process, but not the process itself. A person can want something with every fiber of their being for decades and produce no change in their physical circumstances if that wanting never crystallizes into a definite, held, protected inner form. The intensity of feeling is not the same as the stability of impression. Matter follows the stronger pattern, and the stronger pattern, when no deliberate form has been impressed and maintained, will always be the old one, built from years of repetition, reinforced by years of evidence, and standing in place not through any hostile force, but simply through the accumulated weight of prior impression. This is the mechanism of stagnation. Old matter follows old form, because new form has never been given the sustained dominance required to produce different matter. The wall that seems to stand between the thinker and their desired reality is made not of external material, but of the accumulated strength of a previous inner pattern that has never been genuinely displaced. And the thinker, not seeing this, directs their energy outward, searching for the external lever that will finally move the wall, never recognizing that the wall is not in the world, but in the comparative dominance of two competing inner forms, one old and strong, one new and unstable. The unstable form does not present itself as what it is. It arrives in the mind dressed as reason. The first disguise is a phrase that sounds like maturity. I'm just adjusting to reality. When evidence suggests that the desired outcome is not materializing on the expected timeline, the mind offers this adjustment as wisdom, as the sign of a practical thinker who responds appropriately to facts. But what the adjustment actually is, in the language of Wattles' law, is the surrender of the impressed form under the pressure of old matter. Reality in this framing means present circumstance, but present circumstance is not reality in any final sense. It is the current visible expression of a prior form, and submitting to it as though it were the defining truth is the act of allowing the past to govern the future one more time. The second disguise is similarly reasonable. I don't want to be unrealistic. The fear beneath this sentence is genuine, and the fear has a real cost because what it actually does is define the boundary of the inner image at a level determined by what already exists. To refuse to hold an image that exceeds current conditions because doing so feels unrealistic is to use present matter as the ceiling of future form. This is the precise reversal of the creative law. The impressed image is supposed to exceed present matter. It is supposed to be the form that present matter does not yet match, held faithfully until matter reorganizes upward to meet it. Calling that excess unrealistic is not humility. It is the old form using the language of common sense to protect its own dominance. Maybe I should want less. This third disguise is the most emotionally insidious because it presents itself as spiritual, as the surrender of ego and the acceptance of what is. There are genuine traditions of non-attachment that counsel against the suffering produced by desire, and those traditions have their own integrity. But in Wattles' law, this is not what is happening. When the mind says perhaps a smaller desire would be more appropriate, what is happening is that the impressed form, meeting resistance from old matter, is being revised downward to reduce the risk of being wrong. The inner image shrinks to fit the visible evidence, and in shrinking it becomes less distinct, less definite, and less capable of providing the clear impression that the formless substance requires. The evidence says this is impossible. This fourth disguise is the most direct form of old matter claiming authority over the inner image. Evidence is visible. Evidence is tangible. Evidence carries the weight of the already existing world, and when that world speaks, it speaks loudly. The bank statement is real. The rejection is real. The empty calendar, the unanswered message, the unchanged condition, all of it is physically present and verifiable. But in the creative law, evidence is a report on the past, not a prediction of the future. It shows where previous form has led, not where current impression is headed. To accept evidence as the final word on what is possible is to accept the past as the permanent governor of the present, and to concede to old matter the authority that belongs to the new impressed form. Each of these four disguises is, at its root, old matter commanding the image. The external world, through evidence, limitation, apparent fact, and social pressure, sends a continuous signal that the current condition is the governing reality. The mind that receives this signal without defense and allows it to rewrite the inner form is not being realistic. It is being governed. The law of the impressed image requires the thinker to recognize these disguises as what they are, the old pattern attempting to reassert its dominance over a new form that has not yet fully established itself in the substance. Recognizing the disguise is the first act of breaking it. The inner voice that sounds like reason is sometimes old matter speaking with a borrowed authority it does not actually possess. When the unstable form is kept, when the inner image continues to be revised under pressure, the physical world does not punish the thinker. It simply stays loyal to the pattern it has been given. The bank account that seemed like it should have changed by now continues to reflect the form that has been dominant. The relationship that seemed like it should have shifted continues to mirror the inner pattern that has been governing it. The circumstance that felt on the edge of transformation remains in its current configuration because the new form never achieved dominance. The physical world is not stubborn. It is obedient. The cost of keeping the unstable form is that the physical world obeys the wrong master faithfully. Desire, under these conditions, never becomes instruction. It circulates as longing, as aspiration, as the painful awareness of a gap between what is and what should be. But it never crosses the threshold into the operative state that Wattles described as the certain way. The energy of desire, enormous and real, is expended in the gap between wanting and impressing. In the space between feeling the desire and holding the form. Years of intense wanting can produce no physical change, not because the desire was insufficient, but because the desire never stabilized into the definite, sustained, protected inner form that the law requires in order to do its work. The fuel was present. The blueprint was not. Without a governing form, action loses its direction. This is the third cost, and it shows up in the exhaustion that many driven and sincere people feel after years of extraordinary effort. They have worked hard. They have tried many things. They have adjusted their approach repeatedly, but the actions, however energetic, were not organized by a consistent inner form. They were organized by the evidence of what seemed possible today, which differed from what seemed possible yesterday, which differed again from what will seem possible tomorrow, when new evidence arrives. Effort without a stable form produces motion, sometimes impressive motion, but not construction. It does not build toward the blueprint because there is no single blueprint being consistently followed. The deepest cost is a particular kind of confusion about where the problem actually lies. The thinker who has kept the unstable form for years and produced no lasting change will often conclude that matter is stubborn, that the outer world resists, that the law, if it exists at all, does not apply to their specific circumstances, or perhaps that they are uniquely excluded from its operation. None of these conclusions is accurate, but all of them are understandable given that the actual cause remains invisible. The cause is the instability of the inner image, the gap between the desire that is felt and the form that is held, the distance between wanting change and impressing the form that change must follow. As long as the actual cause remains unnamed, the cost of keeping the unstable form will continue to accumulate, and the thinker will continue to search for the answer in the only place it cannot be found, in the outer world that is simply following their instruction. The first movement in breaking the pattern is deceptively simple. Choose the form, not approximately, not aspirationally, not with one foot in desire and the other in doubt, but with the deliberate and complete authority of a mind that has understood the law and decided to follow it. The form must be chosen specifically, given its definite character, named internally with enough clarity that it could be described without confusion or qualification. This act of choosing is not a declaration of certainty about outcomes. It is a declaration of the image that will be impressed. The desired form must be selected and given its final shape before the law can operate, and that selection is an act of will that must precede every other step. After the form is chosen, it must be named clearly, even if only internally. Naming is the act of stabilization. A form that cannot be named clearly is a form that has not yet achieved the definiteness that impression requires. To say, "I want more abundance," is not naming. To say, "My financial life expresses wealth in these specific ways," is naming. The specificity is not about demanding a particular channel through which the formless substance must deliver the result. It is about providing the substance with a form sharp enough to be impressed, a blueprint detailed enough to be followed. The name given to the desired form in one's inner conversation is the signature at the bottom of the blueprint. Once chosen and named, the form must be protected from fear-driven revision. This is where the breaking of the old pattern requires the most sustained effort, because the pressure to revise will come daily, sometimes hourly, in the form of evidence, doubt, practical concern, and the well-meaning counsel of other minds still governed by old matter. Protection does not mean ignoring physical reality or refusing to respond to practical demands. It means maintaining the authority of the impressed image over the inner world, even while the outer world is dealt with practically. The blueprint remains on the table, even while the current site looks nothing like the finished building. The turning point is near. What has been described in this section, the naming of the blocker, the exposure of its disguises, the accounting of its costs, and the first movements of stabilization, is the preparation for the decisive inner reorientation that makes the law operational. The section that follows describes that reorientation directly. What was done to the inner image by instinct and habit can be undone by understanding and decision. The form that has been surrendered repeatedly can be chosen, named, protected, and held. And when it is held, matter, following the law it has always followed, has no authority left except the one that has been impressed within. The turning point begins not with addition, but with cessation. Before the new inner position can be installed, the behaviors that have been dismantling the impressed form must be stopped, each identified and each released with the full understanding of what it costs. The first is the act of changing the form under pressure. Whenever evidence becomes uncomfortable, Whenever the physical world delivers information that contradicts the desired image, the reflex has been to revise the blueprint. This revision must stop, not because the evidence is irrelevant, but because the evidence reports the past and the blueprint governs the future. These are two different documents, and they do not govern the same territory. The form held for the future cannot be revised by the evidence of the past without the future simply becoming the past again. Allowing matter to dictate the blueprint is the second behavior that must cease. This is the broader pattern of which daily revision is only one expression. It is the orientation in which the physical world functions as the authority on what is possible, desirable, or permissible in the inner image. When circumstances write the inner picture, when the account balance determines how wealthy the thinker is allowed to feel, when the current relationship determines how loving the thinker is allowed to imagine their relational life being, matter is governing form. This is the reversal of the creative law, and until it is stopped, the law cannot operate in the direction of transformation. The external world must be returned to its proper position as the effect, and the inner form must be restored to its position as the cause. Speaking old evidence as if it were the final word must also stop. Every sentence that declares the current condition as the governing truth of the thinker's life is an act of impression. An impression of the old form performed through language, reinforced through the vocal declaration of what is, as though it were also what must be. This is just how things are for me is not an observation. It is a creative act that impresses old form. Money has always been a struggle is not a history. It is a blueprint being continuously relayed over the site where a new structure is trying to be built. The language of the old condition must be retired, not because words are magical spells, but because deliberate speech is one of the primary channels through which dominant inner form is reinforced or revised. Mixing desire with fear in the inner image must end. The impression that carries both the image of the desired form and the feeling of fear about whether it will arrive is not a clean impression. It is a compromised one. The fear does not cancel the desire, but it installs a competing form alongside it, a form of lack and uncertainty that the formless substance receives with equal fidelity. The thinker who wants abundance but fears that they are unworthy of it, who wants health but fears that their body will not cooperate, who wants success but fears that the opportunity will be lost, is issuing two simultaneous instructions to a medium that cannot hold contradictory forms. Fear must be recognized as form, as a competing blueprint that must be consciously displaced before the desired form can achieve full dominance. The treatment of visualization as entertainment must also be released, and its replacement with the understanding of impression as a governing act must be complete. Visualization practiced as a pleasant mental exercise, something done briefly and released into the day without commitment or protection, is not the mechanism Wattles described. It resembles the mechanism superficially, but lacks the critical element, the sustained, faithful holding of the form as the dominant pattern against which all experience will be interpreted and all action will be organized. When visualization is entertainment, the form is a guest. When impression is understood correctly, the form is the law of the house. These are not the same relationship, and the results they produce are not remotely comparable. Having stopped the patterns that dismantle form, the thinker must now accept a principle that overturns the fundamental assumption with which most people approach the outer world. The inner form must precede outer change. This is not a preference or a strategy. It is the causal order of the law. The visible follows the invisible, always, without exception. Accepting this fully means releasing the demand that circumstances show progress before the inner image is committed to, releasing the requirement that matter move first as proof before faith is extended. It means accepting that the form is the cause and the matter is the effect, and that causes precede their effects. This acceptance is not intellectual. It must be felt as operative truth. It must be believed deeply enough to govern inner behavior in the moments when the outer evidence argues most loudly against it. Matter follows the held form. Accepting this means accepting the full weight of its implication. If matter is following something you do not want, the held form is the place to look. Not the economy, not other people, not fate or luck or timing, but the dominant inner pattern that matter is faithfully expressing. This acceptance is simultaneously humbling and empowering. Humbling because it removes all the external explanations for why the desired life has not yet appeared. Empowering because it restores full causation to the thinker. If matter follows the held form and the thinker chooses the held form, then the thinker is the origin of their physical world, not its victim, not its observer, its author. Faith is required to keep the blueprint. Accepting this means accepting that there will be a period, potentially an extended one, in which the form is held and acted upon while matter has not yet visibly reorganized to match it. This period is not evidence that the law has failed. It is the time required for the formless substance to take the new form and for the channels through which matter reorganizes to develop and deliver. During this period, faith is not a feeling that must be manufactured. It is a decision maintained through the understanding that the law operates on a timeline governed by the depth and consistency of the impression, not by the thinker's preference for speed. Accepting this removes the demand that immediate visible results validate the inner work, and in removing that demand, it removes the most common cause of premature abandonment. Gratitude protects the connection to the source from which the substance reorganizes. Accepting this means incorporating gratitude not as a mood to be cultivated when things go well, but as a permanent inner posture that keeps the channel between the thinker's mind and the formless intelligence open. A closed channel, one constricted by complaint, resentment, fear, or the chronic expectation of scarcity, is a channel through which the reorganization of matter toward the new form cannot proceed freely. Gratitude keeps the channel open. Accepting it as a functional necessity, rather than a pleasant supplement to the law, is one of the most practically important decisions the thinker can make. Action builds the bridge. Accepting this is the final element of what must be taken in. The inner form, however perfectly impressed, does not complete its reorganization of matter without the bridge of aligned action. The bridge does not need to be grand or extraordinary. It needs to be consistent and directed by the blueprint. Each small action taken from the inner form adds a brick to the bridge. Each day of aligned action reduces the gap between the impressed image and the physical world that must eventually follow it. Accepting this means accepting the responsibility to act, not from the evidence of what currently is, but from the authority of the form that has been impressed. Action from the blueprint is the thinker's physical cooperation with the law, and the law met with that cooperation completes its work. The statement that expresses the new inner position is simple in its structure and absolute in its implication. Matter follows the form I impress. This sentence, internalized as operative truth rather than aspiration, transforms the relationship between the thinker and the physical world entirely. It does not say matter might follow the form I impress, or matter will eventually follow, or matter followed for others but may not follow for me. It says matter follows, present tense, universal, causal. The physical world, in this inner position, is not an independent force to be negotiated with. It is the effect of a cause that originates in the thinker's inner image. This position does not deny difficulty or ignore time. It simply locates the governing authority correctly. From this position, the thinker says inwardly, I hold the image. These three words replace the entire history of passive reception in which the inner picture was copied from external evidence. The thinker who holds the image is not held by the image of the world. They are not at the mercy of what the mirror shows, what the account reflects, what the circumstance presents. They hold the image as the architect holds the blueprint on a site that does not yet resemble the finished structure. Holding requires active maintenance. It requires the repeated return to the impressed form when the world has temporarily displaced it, the daily recommitment to the blueprint when the evidence of the current site seems to argue for revision. The position also says, I do not let old matter rewrite it. This is the active refusal that distinguishes the thinker, following the law, from the thinker, who agrees with the law intellectually, but surrenders to old form whenever evidence applies pressure. Old matter will present itself. The old condition will be visible every morning. The old pattern will have the weight of familiarity, of history, of social consensus, and of physical proof. The new inner position does not argue with these things. It simply does not grant them the authority to rewrite the blueprint. Evidence of old form is received, noted practically, and then placed in its correct category. Information about where the previous form has led, not instructions about where the new form is permitted to go. The position culminates in the governing instruction. I act according to the blueprint. Every action, from the smallest to the most significant, is filtered through the question of whether it flows from the impressed form or from the old pattern. This is not a paralyzing question, it is a clarifying one. Most actions that serve the impressed form are ordinary and practical. The work done well today, the conversation pursued because the form says it is worthwhile, the development of a capacity the blueprint calls for, the presentation of a new financial self in small daily economic decisions. The blueprint does not demand spectacular acts, it demands consistent ones, and consistent action from the new inner position is how the distance between the impressed form and the visible matter is closed day by day. The moment that precedes all lasting transformation is the moment of choice, and it cannot be delayed indefinitely without cost. Two options stand before the thinker who has arrived at this understanding. The first is old matter, the existing physical condition with all its weight, its familiarity, its evidence, and its claim on the inner image. The second is the impressed form, the new blueprint that exists as yet only in the inner world, unsupported by visible evidence, requiring faith to sustain it. The choice must be made, not once and then forgotten. Every day, sometimes every hour, in the moments when evidence is loud and faith is quiet, the choice must be made again. Old matter feels undeniable in the way that only things already standing can feel undeniable. Its weight is real, its physical presence is real. The account that shows what it shows is not an illusion. The condition of the body is not imaginary. The current state of the relationship is not invented. Old matter is genuinely present, and the mind that has been organized around it for years will experience its presence as the most solid and reliable information available. This solidity is the source of the old form's power over the inner image. It is not that old matter is hostile. It is that old matter is there, visible and touchable, while the new form is only felt. The choice to follow the felt form over the visible one is the most counter-instinctive act the law requires. The inner form feels invisible but causal. The blueprint exists in a dimension that cannot be touched or photographed or presented as evidence to another person. And yet, in the understanding Wattles built across his entire body of work, this invisible form is the only thing that is genuinely and finally causal. The physical world that everyone agrees is real and solid is, in his framework, the downstream product of a form that existed in the invisible world of thought before it ever appeared in the visible world of matter. To choose the invisible form over the visible matter is not to deny reality. It is to align with the deeper reality that precedes and produces the surface one. The viewer who has followed this teaching to this point stands at the exact place where the law either becomes a life-governing principle or remains an interesting idea. The choice to cause rather than to be caused, to impress rather than to be impressed, to hold the blueprint rather than to receive the building as given, is the choice that determines which of these the law will be. Old matter offers the comfort of the familiar. The impressed form offers the authority of cause. These are not equal choices in their consequences, and the only thing standing between the thinker and the second one is the willingness to hold an invisible form with a faith that has not yet been rewarded by visible evidence, in the full understanding that the reward comes precisely because the form was held before the evidence appeared. The first practical act of impressing the form is to define the desired reality in one sentence, specifically and without qualification. Not a paragraph of aspirations, not a vision of approximate general improvement, but a single sentence that describes the desired condition with enough clarity to function as a blueprint. My work creates abundant value, and that value returns to me as financial freedom, is a sentence that carries a form. I want to be more successful is not. The definiteness of the sentence is what makes it impressible. Vague language produces a vague form. A vague form produces a vague impression. and a vague impression upon the formless substance produces only a vague reorganization, which looks from the outside like nothing happening. Once the sentence has been formed, the next step is to feel the desired condition as already lawful, as already the correct expression of this particular life, already owed to the one who holds it. This is not the feeling of already having it in a delusional sense. It is the deeper feeling that this form belongs to the thinker by the law of their own creative capacity, that it is appropriate, that it is already set in motion at the level of form, even if not yet visible at the level of matter. This felt legitimacy is part of what Wattles meant by faith. It is the inner experience of the form as real before the evidence of its reality exists in the physical world. The third element of the daily practice is to hold the image before checking the evidence each morning. This one disciplined act, placing the impression of the desired form into the mind before the mind has been organized by the day's incoming circumstances, changes the entire sequence described earlier. When the inner form is established first, attention organizes around it rather than around the circumstance. Perception is organized by the blueprint before the day's evidence has had a chance to reinstate old form. The entire sequence from attention to matter shifts in its direction from the first moment of the day, simply because the form was impressed before the evidence was consulted. The fourth element is to ask, with each significant decision in the day, what action matches the form. Not what action the evidence permits, not what action fear allows, not what action the current circumstances support, but what action the blueprint calls for. This question is the practical expression of the new inner position. It makes the impressed form the governing authority of behavior, and over time the accumulation of actions taken from this question builds the bridge between the inner blueprint and the outer matter in the way that consistent work from a plan builds a building. No single action is dramatic. The direction of all actions organized by the governing form is decisive. The fifth element is to refuse revision from panic. When the evidence becomes particularly loud, when the circumstance seems to demand that the image be updated to match it, the discipline of non-revision is essential. The refusal is not a refusal to engage practically with what is present. Bills are paid, problems are addressed, the physical world is dealt with, but the blueprint is not revised. Practical engagement with the current condition does not require the surrender of the governing inner form. A builder who finds that a material delivery has been delayed does not tear up the blueprint. They manage the delay while keeping the plan. The thinker who finds that circumstances have delivered a temporary setback manages the setback while keeping the form. The inner language with which the thinker narrates their experience is the medium through which the dominant form is either reinforced or displaced. One of the most direct applications of Wattles' law in daily life is the deliberate replacement of sentences that impress old form with sentences that impress the new one. The sentence, "Matter refuses to change," belongs to the old position. It makes matter an agent with its own will, a force that resists the thinker's desire by independent choice. The replacement is, "Matter follows the impressed form," a sentence that returns causation to the thinker, identifies the variable that actually governs the outcome, and reframes apparent stagnation as the consequence of an unstable impression rather than an indifferent universe. The sentence, "Evidence is final," treats the current physical condition as the governing document of the thinker's future. Its replacement is, "Evidence is old form visible." This single reframing changes the relationship to circumstances entirely. The bank balance that seems to declare poverty is, in this understanding, not declaring anything about the future. It is showing the residue of a previous form made visible in the present. It is information about what has been, not a command about what must continue. Old form visible is not a ceiling. It is a snapshot of the prior blueprint's current physical expression. The new blueprint, once impressed and held, will produce its own snapshot in time. And that snapshot will look different because the form it follows is different. The sentence, "I must see first," carries the assumption that physical evidence must precede inner commitment, that the result must appear before faith is extended. Its replacement is, "I must impress first." This is the full reversal that Wattles' law requires, stated as a personal operating principle rather than a philosophical abstraction. The sequence runs from impression to matter, not from matter to impression. To wait for the visible before committing to the form is to wait for the effect before providing the cause, which is to say, to wait indefinitely. The thinker who replaces "I must see first" with "I must impress first" has aligned their inner language with the actual direction of causation, and their daily experience of the gap between desire and reality will gradually transform as their dominant thought shifts from dependence on evidence to authority of form. The replacement of these three thought patterns is not an exercise in positive affirmation. It is not the recitation of encouraging phrases without inner transformation. Each replacement carries a specific understanding of the mechanism, and it is the understanding, not the phrase, that changes the inner form. The thinker who says evidence is old form visible, while genuinely understanding what that means, is doing something entirely different from the thinker who repeats it as a slogan. The thought discipline described here is effective to the degree that the thinker has internalized the law deeply enough that the replacement sentences feel true rather than aspirational. This is why understanding the mechanism precedes practicing the language. The language serves the understanding produces the impression. The fourth element of thought discipline is the ongoing audit of the internal narrative between the three formal replacements described. Throughout the day, thoughts arise that either reinforce old form or create space for new form. The thinker who has decided to follow the certain way develops a sensitivity to which category each arising thought belongs to, not in a manner that is obsessive or anxious, but with the calm recognition of someone who knows which direction they are building. A thought that announces limitation and expects its continuation is an old form thought. A thought that acknowledges a current condition while maintaining the authority of the new blueprint is a new form thought. The capacity to distinguish between these and to redirect the former toward the latter is the practical expression of what Wattles called efficient and effective thinking. Action in the certain way is not defined by its scale or its drama. It is defined by its alignment with the impressed form. The thinker who acts according to the blueprint does not necessarily take large or visible actions each day. They take whichever actions the blueprint indicates are next, whether those actions are small or significant, whether they feel inspired or simply necessary. The scale of the action is irrelevant to its function in the law. What matters is the direction from which it comes and the form it serves. An action taken in alignment with the impressed image, however modest in its outer appearance, is a brick from the plan. It reduces the distance between the inner form and the outer matter that must follow it. Action taken from fear is action from the old form. Fear originates in the inner experience of the current condition as final, of old matter as the governing reality, of the gap between the desired form and the present circumstance as evidence that the law is not working. When action is driven by this fear, it serves the old form even when it is aimed at the new one. The thinker who pursues an opportunity while feeling desperate is impressing both the opportunity and the desperation into the medium. The certain way requires that action be taken from the inner position of the impressed form, from the quiet authority of the blueprint held with faith, not from the anxious attempt to make matter comply through force of effort. Each action should be understood as a brick placed from the blueprint, a physical contribution to the bridge between the inner form and the outer world. This understanding transforms the relationship with daily work. What might otherwise feel like tedious effort, disconnected from the grand desired transformation, becomes, in the certain way, the physical enactment of the law. Today's work done with skill and integrity, offered at the highest level of which the thinker is currently capable, is the present moment expression of the form that is being impressed. It does not need to be glamorous. It needs to be aligned. And the work that is aligned with the blueprint day after day is the accumulating physical construction of the structure the inner form has already designed. Present work must be performed in alignment with the blueprint because present work is the current point of contact between the thinker and the channels through which matter reorganizes. A thinker who neglects or dishonors present work while waiting for the large transformation to appear has misunderstood the certain way. The large transformation arrives through the channels that present work opens, through the relationships developed, the skills refined, the value created, and the integrity demonstrated in the work that exists right now. Present work, is not what the thinker does until the real opportunity appears. It is where the real opportunity is being constructed, brick by brick, through aligned action in the present moment. The final element of action in the certain way is the avoidance of theatrical gestures, of grand dramatic acts designed to signal commitment rather than to actually build the bridge. The law is not impressed by theatrical demonstration. A person who makes a large symbolic gesture toward their desired form, but whose daily small actions remain governed by old form, has spent their energy on performance rather than construction. The certain way is quiet, consistent, and directed. It does not announce itself. It builds. Every brick placed correctly from the blueprint is more operative in the law than any number of dramatic declarations that are not followed by the consistent alignment of daily action with the form that has been impressed. Old evidence will seem loud. There will be days when the circumstances are so insistently present that the impressed form feels very far away, when the account balance speaks at full volume, when the body's current condition shouts over the blueprint, when the relationship's present state seems to make the inner image of a different one feel like delusion. These moments are not failures of the law. They are the ordinary conditions under which the law is actually followed. Anyone can maintain an inner form when the evidence is supportive. The practice of the certain way is demonstrated precisely in the moments when the evidence is not supportive, when old matter is loudest, and when the impressed form requires the most deliberate maintenance. The first response in these moments is to pause, not to analyze, not to defend, not to argue with the circumstance, but simply to stop and notice that old matter has become loud and that the inner image requires restoration. The pause interrupts the automatic movement from loud evidence to revised form, the reflex in which the mounting weight of circumstance would ordinarily cause the blueprint to be folded and replaced. The pause creates the space in which a different response becomes possible. It is a small act, often invisible to anyone observing from the outside, but it is the moment at which the thinker chooses to be the author of the form rather than the receiver of it. After the pause, the form is re-impressed, not revised, not negotiated with the evidence, not reduced to a more comfortable size but restored to its full clarity. The original sentence that defined the desired form is returned to with its original specificity. The felt quality of the form as lawful and real is recovered. The blueprint is placed back on the table with the same authority it had before the evidence became loud. This act of re-impression under pressure is, in a sense, the most powerful act available to the thinker following the certain way. It is the moment at which the new form most clearly demonstrates its dominance over the old one, because it is the moment at which the old one was presenting its most compelling argument for its own continuation. Entering gratitude after re-impression closes the channel that the pressure of old evidence had been constricting. Gratitude, in Wattles' system, does not merely feel good. It reconnects the thinker's mind to the formless intelligence from which the reorganization of matter proceeds. The moment of gratitude after a moment of pressure is not a performance. It is a functional act that restores alignment between the thinker and the creative source, reopens the channels that doubt was narrowing, and signals to the inner world that the thinker's relationship to their desired form has not been surrendered but deepened. Gratitude after difficulty, after evidence has been loud and faith has been tested, is perhaps the most powerful expression of the certain way in daily practice. The final act in restoring the state under doubt is to take one blueprint-aligned action, small but definite, that expresses the form in the physical world immediately after it has been restored inwardly. This action does not need to be large. It needs to be real. It is the physical declaration that the impression has been held, that the form is still the governing authority, that the bridge is still being built. One phone call made from the blueprint's direction. One piece of work completed with the quality the form requires. One decision made from the inner position of the impressed form rather than from the psychology of old matter. The action follows the re-impression, and in following it, it builds the bridge another brick further toward the matter that must eventually obey. Consider a person who wants a genuinely different financial life. They want to move from financial pressure and daily scarcity into the experience of abundance, and they hold that want with real intensity. But each time they sit with the desire, the bank account speaks. It presents itself as evidence of what is real. The number in the account determines how wealthy this person allows themselves to feel, which determines how abundantly they allow themselves to think, which determines how their attention is organized, which determines what opportunities they notice, which determines what actions they take. The account is governing the inner form, and the inner form is governing the account. The loop is closed, and the loop produces the same result every time. At some point, this person encounters the understanding that the account balance is not a declaration of their financial reality. It is a snapshot of an old form made visible in the present. The form that governed yesterday's account is not the form they are choosing to impress going forward. They define in one sentence the financial life they intend to have, not approximately but specifically, with the felt quality of its reality established inwardly. They hold this form each morning before looking at the account. They enter the day organized around the impression of abundance rather than the evidence of pressure. The account does not change that day, but their attention, organized now by the new form, begins to move differently. They begin to notice what they had been walking past. A conversation that seemed like small talk reveals a connection to a situation directly relevant to the form they are holding. A skill they had dismissed as insufficient turns out to be precisely what a developing opportunity requires. An action they had been postponing, one that their old form told them was unlikely to succeed, is taken from the new form's authority and produces a response. None of these events is dramatic. Each is a channel opening. None of them would have been noticed, pursued, or completed, while the account balance was still governing the inner form. The new impression organized attention. Attention changed perception. Perception changed choice. Choice changed action. And action began the physical process of the account following the form rather than the form following the account. The account does not transform overnight. The reorganization of matter through channels takes time. There are mornings when the old evidence is loud, when the number in the account seems to argue with overwhelming authority that the new form is wishful thinking. On those mornings, the person pauses, re-impresses the form, enters gratitude, and takes one aligned action. The blueprint stays on the table, the bricks keep being laid. And what emerges over weeks and months is not a sudden miraculous change, but the gradual, lawful reorganization of material circumstances around the form that has finally achieved dominance over the old one. Matter was not stubbornly refusing to obey. It was obeying faithfully. The shift was in the form it was given to follow. Everything in Wattles' teaching about creative law compresses, ultimately, into 4 words and the relationship between them: form, impression, faith, action. Matter follows form. This is not a spiritual opinion or a motivational preference. It is, in Wattles' framework, the causal description of how the visible world comes into being. Before any physical result can exist, a form must have existed in the invisible world of thought. Before any circumstance can persist, a form must be sustaining it through the ongoing impression of a dominant inner pattern. The physical world, in its entirety, is the obedient expression of forms that are being held somewhere by someone. The question that governs each person's physical life is only which forms they are holding, and whether those forms were chosen deliberately or received passively from the world they were born into. Form must be impressed. This requirement is not a side note in the teaching. It is the hinge of the entire system. The form that exists as a vague wish in the mind, entertained but not impressed, desired but not committed to, held for moments and abandoned under pressure, is not a form in the operative sense. For form to function as a command to the formless substance, it must be pressed inward with the deliberate intention of a thinker who has decided to use the law rather than to be used by old form. Impression is the act of making a thought dominant, definite, and sustained enough to reorganize the intelligent substance from which matter arises. Without impression, form remains psychological. With impression, it becomes causal. Faith holds the impression active. Across time, against evidence, through the period between the impressed form and the visible result, faith is the single interior quality that keeps the blueprint on the table. Without faith, the gap between the impression and the result is filled with doubt, and doubt is not an absence of instruction to the formless substance. It is a competing instruction, a form of uncertainty that the substance receives alongside the desired form, and that dilutes the clarity of the command. Faith, understood as the inner decision to hold the form as real before matter confirms it, is the structural element that makes the difference between a form that is held long enough to produce matter and a form that is abandoned before the reorganization is complete. Action builds the bridge from the inner world to the outer one. The impressed form, maintained by faith, must be expressed physically through the consistent alignment of daily action with the blueprint. Without action, the inner form remains complete on one side of the bridge, while the matter it is calling into being remains in its current configuration on the other. The bridge is built brick by brick, action by action, decision by decision, each physical act of aligned effort, reducing the distance between what is impressed inwardly and what has been manifested outwardly. This is not vague encouragement to work hard. It is the precise requirement of the law, that the thinker who holds the form also builds the bridge in the certain way, through actions that serve the form and not the fear. In the old life, evidence commands the image. The physical world speaks first. The inner world listens and adjusts. The desired form is revised to match the visible condition, and the condition remains because the form that governs it has never genuinely changed. This is the life lived at the level of effect, where circumstances determine inner state, where the account balance determines how wealthy a person feels, where the current relationship determines what love seems possible, where the present condition of the body determines what health can be imagined. The inner world in this life is a mirror held up to the outer one, reflecting it faithfully, producing nothing new, because a mirror does not create, it reproduces. In the new life, the image commands matter. The inner form is established first, held with faith, protected from revision by evidence, expressed through action, and the physical world reorganizes toward it through the channels that aligned action and intelligent substance make available. This is the life lived at the level of cause, where the thinker is the origin of their circumstances rather than their product. The account balance in this life is not the ceiling of possible wealth. It is the current visible expression of a form that is already being displaced by a new impression. The current condition is not final. It is transitional. It is old matter on its way to becoming new matter in the image of a form that has been impressed and held. The old mind copies the visible. It receives the world as given, takes its inner picture from the circumstances it encounters, and reproduces those circumstances with minor variations through the pattern described across this entire video. The copies are faithful. The results are predictable. The old mind is not defective. It is simply organized around a law in the wrong direction, taking its form from matter instead of giving matter its form. The effort the old mind applies to changing the outer world while leaving the inner form unchanged is not wasted in a moral sense. It is simply effort aimed at the wrong variable, like trying to change the shadow by moving things around in front of the projector while leaving the original image untouched. The new mind impresses the invisible. It takes the desired form into thought, holds it with deliberate intention and faith, and lets the visible world develop as a consequence of what has been impressed rather than as the source of what can be desired. The new mind operates at the level of first cause, not because it ignores reality, but because it understands which reality is first. The invisible form is first. The visible matter is second. This sequence, reversed in ordinary experience and restored in the certain way, is the single difference between a life governed by old form and a life in which matter follows the image that has been pressed inward with faith, gratitude, and the consistent alignment of daily action. Matter is not the first voice. It has never been the first voice, though it has learned to speak so loudly and so persistently that it has persuaded most people to treat it as the origin of what is possible. The physical world announces itself with the authority of the already built, the already existing, the tangible and measurable and verifiable, and in its announcement, it issues a continuous invitation to the inner world to take its picture from what has been rather than from what is being impressed. This invitation is not hostile. It is simply the natural tendency of old form to reassert its own continuity. Matter speaks from what it already is. It cannot speak from what it has not yet become. The authority of the first voice belongs to something else, the impressed image, is the first voice. In the sequence that runs from invisible to visible, from thought to form to substance, from substance to matter, the impressed image occupies the position of origin. It is where the causal sequence begins, where the creative intelligence of the thinker makes its entry into the medium of the formless. The physical result that finally appears at the end of the sequence is not evidence of what the thinker wanted. It is evidence of what the thinker held, what was impressed and maintained, what was fed by faith and expressed by action and protected from the continuous pressure of old matter to reinstate its own pattern. The impressed image does not speak loudly. It does not need to. Cause does not need to argue with its own effect. Hold the form until matter follows. This is the final instruction of everything Wattles taught about this law, and its simplicity is not a reduction of the complexity, but the distillation of it. Hold the form, define it, impress it, sustain it with faith, connect it through gratitude to the source, act upon it in the certain way, refuse to let evidence revise it, restore it when doubt displaces it, and return to it every time old matter attempts to reclaim authority over the inner world. Until matter follows, because matter will follow. The law that has governed the physical world all along, the law that produced every circumstance in every life by faithfully following the dominant impressed form, is the same law that will produce a new circumstance when a new form becomes dominant. The law does not play favorites. It does not withhold its operation. It follows form with absolute fidelity, and the thinker who provides a clear and sustained impression will receive its full obedience. The entire length of this teaching has been pointing toward a single inner position, a place from which the viewer can now stand and declare their relationship to the law that has been laid out. Not declare it as an aspiration, not declare it as a hope they carry for the future, but declare it as the operative truth of their inner life from this moment forward. The declaration is not a magical phrase. It is the verbal compression of a complete understanding, a summary of the causal sequence, the symbol of the thinker's decision to function as the origin of their physical world rather than as its product. It belongs not on a page or a screen, but inside the interior conversation, the voice that speaks in the quiet moments of each day, the governing language of the dominant inner form. Before the declaration is made, let everything in this video settle into its proper position. The law is real, the mechanism is invisible but exact, the interruptions are ordinary and recognizable, the path through them is demanding but entirely clear. What Wattles offered was not comfort against the difficulty of life. It was a precise description of the causal order underlying physical reality, offered to any thinker willing to take the inner position it requires. The viewer who has arrived at this moment of the video has been given everything needed to work with the law. What remains is the choice to work with it, expressed in the form of a declaration that matter will hear, because matter cannot hear anything except the form that is impressed within. There is a statement that belongs to every person who has understood this law and decided to follow it. Not understood it as an interesting idea, not decided to try it tentatively, but understood it as the operative description of how their physical life is created and decided to stand inside that understanding as a permanent inner position. The statement is this: matter follows the form I impress. Let those words land with their full weight. Matter follows, always. The physical world does not have an independent agenda. It has a law. And the law says that it follows the form that is held within, the image that is impressed upon the intelligent substance from which all visible things arise. The question was never whether matter follows form. The question was always whether the form being impressed was the one you chose. Say it inwardly with the quality of a decision rather than a prayer. Matter follows the form I impress. This means that every circumstance that persists in your life is following something, and everything that will emerge in your life will follow the form that achieves dominance in your inner world going forward. The old evidence is not the governing truth. The impressed image is the governing truth. The account balance does not determine what wealth you can hold inwardly. The inner form of wealth determines what the account balance must eventually express. This is not optimism. It is the direction of causation, stated as a personal declaration by the thinker who has placed themselves at the correct end of the sequence. If this understanding has shifted something inside you today, Carry that shift into the comment below. Write the words that mark your new inner position. Write, "Matter follows the form I impress." Write it as what it is, a declaration of the law you have chosen to live by, a statement of identity from the thinker who has decided to function as cause rather than effect, a blueprint vow made in the only place that produces physical reality, which is the interior world of the mind, that presses form upon substance and waits, with faith, for matter to follow. If the teaching of Wallace Wattles on matter, form, creative law, and the certain way belongs in your life as an ongoing practice, this channel is built for that purpose. Every video here draws from the classical sources directly, from Wattles, from his system, from the precise language he used to describe how thought becomes form and form becomes matter. What is offered here is not a motivational summary or a popular simplification. It is the full depth of the law built into long-form teaching, designed for the kind of understanding that actually changes what you hold inwardly. Subscribe and stay close to this work, because the thinker who returns to the law repeatedly is the one who impresses it most deeply. Every new video on this channel adds another dimension to the understanding you are building. The law of the impressed image does not reveal all of its implications in a single sitting. It deepens with each return, and each return adds clarity to the form you are holding and strength to the faith with which you hold it. Subscribe so that the next teaching finds you where this one left off. From this day forward, the evidence of old matter will not rewrite the form. The bank balance will be seen for what it is, the current visible expression of a prior impression, not the ceiling of what the new form can produce. The closed door will be seen for what it is, old form expressing itself in one channel, while the new form opens another. The loud announcement of what is will not be confused for the final declaration of what must remain. The old condition will be dealt with practically, addressed where it requires attention, managed where it requires management, but it will not be granted the authority to reach into the inner world and revise the blueprint. The blueprint is held, the form is impressed. Evidence is received as information, not as instruction. The form will be held with faith in gratitude through the alignment of daily action taken not from fear, but from the inner authority of the impressed image. Each day of this practice is a day in which matter is receiving a clearer instruction than it received the day before. A day in which the new form is gaining dominance over the old one. A day in which the bridge between the invisible and the visible grows one brick longer. The thinker who holds the form understands that the result is not a reward for patience. It is the inevitable consequence of the law operating exactly as it has always operated, following the dominant form, expressing the sustained impression, building in the physical world what was first built in the world of thought. Matter must follow the form impressed within. This is not a hope carried forward into an uncertain future. It is the description of the law as it has always worked, and as it works now in this life, for the thinker who has chosen to understand it, hold it, and act from it. The formless substance is intelligent and responsive. The channels through which matter reorganizes are open. The law requires only one thing from the thinker who wants to use it: the impressed image, held with faith, expressed through action, protected from revision, and returned to each time old matter speaks above its authority. Hold the form. Matter has no choice but to follow.